The Evil Within is a survival horror game made by Tango Gameworks and published by Bethesda Softworks. Directed by Shinji Mikami, the guy behind the Resident Evil series, it hit the shelves worldwide in October 2014 for platforms like PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Windows, Xbox 360, and Xbox One. In the game, you follow Sebastian Castellanos as he gets dragged into a twisted world filled with creepy places and terrifying monsters. It's played from a third-person view, where you'll face off against all sorts of grotesque enemies, including some tough bosses. You'll need to use guns and melee weapons, navigate through levels while dodging traps, sneak around, and hunt for collectibles. Gameplay. The single-player campaign is divided into 15 chapters, and players need to tackle them in sequence to move the story forward. You'll be playing from a third-person viewpoint, where scavenging for resources and knowing when to fight or flee are crucial for surviving the game's threats. These threats include bear traps, barbed wire, bombs, and spike traps. The Haunted, the most frequent enemy, Reborn Laura, a creepy multi-limbed creature, Ruvik, the main villain, the Keeper, a giant with a safe for a head who swings a massive meat tenderizer, and Sadist, a big guy in a spiked metal mask who wields a blood-soaked chainsaw. Sebastian Castellanos, the main character, has to utilize his surroundings and any items he finds to stay alive. The game world can change during scripted moments or based on player choices, shifting locations and opening new paths or teleporting Sebastian to different areas. He can find syringes and medical kits to heal himself when he gets hurt. While the medical kit boosts his health, it also triggers some hallucinations for a bit. By collecting hidden vials of green gel scattered throughout the game, players can enhance Castellanos' skills, like getting more ammo, extra stamina, and increased health. Players have access to a safe house called Safe Haven, which can be reached during certain events or by locating bright, glowing mirrors. This safe house is set in a mental hospital and features several areas, including a save point, an upgrade room for improving Sebastian's abilities, and a safe room where keys unlock storage safes filled with useful items like green gel and ammo. To get these keys, players need to find and smash Madonna statues hidden across the game. When Sebastian teleports to the safe house, he's greeted by a nurse named Tatiana. Players can choose from a bunch of weapons like a revolver, shotgun, sniper rifle, knife, grenades, and the unique Agony crossbow. This crossbow shoots bolts that can freeze, blind, electrocute, or blow up enemies. Ammo is pretty hard to come by, but you can gather mechanical parts to make more bolts. One way to get these parts is from bombs, which are traps that go off when you get too close or move around. You can find these bombs stuck to walls, on the floor, in chests, or even in vending machines. Disarming them involves a little mini-game. Melee combat is mainly for pushing enemies away, but if you sneak up on some foes, you can take them out instantly. Be careful though. Downed enemies can revive, so you might want to use your limited matches to set them on fire and make sure they stay down. You can also throw items like bottles to distract or stun enemies. In The Evil Within, there are 7 types of collectibles to find. Personal documents, which are Sebastian's logs about his life as a detective and his family. Documents, which are logs from other characters. Map fragments, pieces of the game's map that you can store in the safe house. Collecting all 28 of these unlocks the burst handgun and high-penetration sniper rifle. Then there are newspapers that cover events related to Sebastian, missing persons posters of characters he meets who are missing, and audio tapes that feature recordings from various characters throughout the game. You can find these collectibles scattered throughout the levels or in the safe house. When you finish the game, you get a bunch of cool bonuses. You can unlock extra weapons, new character models and bios, and even the super tough Nightmare and Akumu difficulty levels, with Akumu being the ultimate challenge. Plus, if you beat the game on Akumu mode, you'll score the Brass Knuckles weapon. The plot. While checking out a mass murder scene at Beacon Mental Hospital, Detective Sergeant Sebastian Castellanos from the Crimson City Police along with his partner Joseph Oda, Officer Oscar Connolly, and Junior Detective Julie Kidman, suddenly get sucked into a bizarre world after hearing a weird, high-pitched sound. Right after that, Sebastian gets split from his team and has to run away from a terrifying guy with a chainsaw. When they finally regroup, they try to escape in an ambulance, but a huge earthquake hits Crimson City, leading to a crash. After getting out of the wreck, Sebastian finds himself wandering through dark woods and creepy abandoned buildings filled with monstrous beings, and he spots a disfigured guy in a white hood. He then runs into Oscar, who's going through a strange transformation that drives him into a violent frenzy. In self-defense, Sebastian has no choice but to take Oscar down. Soon after, he meets one of the hospital's doctors, Marcelo Jimenez, who's on the hunt for his patient, Leslie Withers. Jimenez points out that the hooded figure following them is Ruvik. Eventually, Sebastian finds Joseph again, but it turns out Joseph is also dealing with a weird transformation that could make him violent, just like Oscar. He manages to keep it in check for now, but warns Sebastian to watch out if he loses control. The duo then rescues Kidman from a makeshift drowning trap, but they get separated again after hearing that eerie, high-pitched noise. Sebastian discovers the tale of Ruvik, originally named Ruben Victoriano, through a series of memories that Ruvik immerses him in. Ruben was a bright but troubled kid who had a close bond with his sister Laura. Tragedy struck when Laura was killed while they were playing in a barn, which was set ablaze by some farmers seeking revenge on their parents. Ruben suffered severe burns in the fire, leading his father to hide him away in the basement of their family home. Overwhelmed by the trauma of losing Laura, Ruben eventually murdered both his parents, seized their wealth, and began donating to Beacon Mental Hospital in exchange for test subjects for his twisted experiments on the human mind. Ruvik then created STEM as a way to manipulate reality, allowing him to revisit his memories and relive his life with Laura. Jimenez noticed Ruvik's groundbreaking work and brought it to the attention of Mobius, who wanted to exploit it for their own agenda. To protect his invention, Ruvik designed STEM to function solely with his brain at its center. However, Mobius retaliated by killing him and extracting his brain to use in the machine, which enabled Ruvik to keep control over the STEM environment. Kidman realizes that Mobius is actually after the docile Leslie to replace Ruvik's brain, a malleable blank slate they could use to power STEM and create their own version of reality. When Jimenez, with Sebastian's help, attempts to use Leslie to return to the real world, he discovers that Ruvik plans to transfer his consciousness into a suitable host and break free into reality. A creature born from Ruvik's subconscious takes out Jimenez, and Ruvik sends the group scattering throughout his mind. Kidman is the first to find Leslie and is about to shoot him to stop Ruvik from using him as a vessel when Sebastian and Joseph step in, leading her to accidentally shoot Joseph before Ruvik separates them once more. Sebastian tracks down Leslie and leads him back to the hospital. At the lighthouse's peak, he spots his own body lying in a bathtub connected to the STEM machine. Kidman shows up and tries to persuade Sebastian that Leslie needs to be eliminated. Just then, Ruvik steps in, grabs Leslie, and absorbs him. Sebastian faces off against a massive creature born from Ruvik's mind and manages to take it down, waking up in the bathtub. He pulls himself off the machine, yanks Ruvik's brain out of the STEM, and crushes it. Once again, he finds himself in the tub with Kidman watching over him. Kidman signals for him to keep quiet. Sebastian loses consciousness, and when he comes to, he's back in the same tub, alone except for the bodies of Jimenez and Connolly. As police and SWAT teams arrive, Sebastian makes his way out of the hospital and spots Leslie walking through the main gates. In the midst of her journey, Kidman steps into the machine and is suddenly ambushed by Oscar Connolly, leading her to tumble off a cliff. While she's falling, she hears Mobius's voice and tries to access a keypad, but it's locked. To get through, she has to navigate around various creatures lurking in the area. After getting caught by Ruvik, She's saved by Sebastian and Joseph, but soon finds herself alone as Joseph transforms into a haunted and attacks her. Once she takes him down, the environment shifts, and after overcoming several challenges, she finally locates Leslie and brings him to the church. There, Ruvik confronts her, using Leslie as a puppet to strike at Kidman. She discovers that Ruvik can escape STEM by taking over Leslie's body, and he reveals that Mobius has been monitoring her just like before. In a desperate move, Kidman aims to shoot Leslie, hoping they both vanish, but then the administrator appears, insisting she extract Leslie instead of killing him. Kidman stands her ground, warning him about Ruvik's true power. The administrator then manifests as a dark, misty figure and chases her until she manages to break free. As she exits the church, she spots Beacon Mental Hospital in the distance, but the lighthouse's light suddenly blinds her. After waking up in the safe haven and meeting Tatiana Gutierrez, Juli Granata, Yuko Kaida, Kidman takes some time to explore the area before she can leave. She eventually finds herself back at the Mobius headquarters and decides to head down to the bottom floor where the STEM terminal is, believing that Leslie is on his way there. During her journey, she uncovers more about Ruvik's past with Mobius and how they treated him. When she reaches the terminal, she gets transported back to Crimson City and navigates through the police department, where she stumbles upon memories of Sebastian and Joseph, which makes her feel a sense of sympathy for Sebastian. As she makes her way back to Beacon Mental Hospital, she encounters Sebastian, who has been turned into a haunted by Ruvik. Kidman manages to save him and locate Leslie, but the administrator is hot on her trail. She hops into a school bus to escape, but Ruvik uses his powers to send the bus crashing into a hotel. After recovering, Kidman finds herself separated from Sebastian and Joseph, having lost her handgun in the chaos. As she continues, she comes across Ruvik's paintings that are trying to manipulate Leslie. Kidman successfully saves Leslie, but he flees in fear. As she pushes forward, more paintings attempt to seize control of Leslie. While trying to fend them off, Laura's hands burst from the ground and grab Kidman, and Leslie, in a moment of panic, points a gun at her. However, he manages to break free from Ruvik's influence and shoots the painting, rescuing Kidman. She retrieves her handgun from Leslie and decides to take him with her, hoping to keep him safe. Following this, a scene from the main game unfolds from Kidman's viewpoint, where she sees the administrator instead of Sebastian, who reveals that they know what Leslie is destined to become and that Ruvik is just a corpse. After Leslie has a breakdown, she chases after him but is ultimately pulled back to Mobius HQ. She steps through a door and finds herself in Beacon, where she explores different rooms and discovers that Leslie is synced with Ruvik's brainwaves because of his family loss. It turns out she's just a disposable agent who might be able to take Ruvik down. As she rushes past a bunch of haunted, Kidman manages to hop into an elevator that takes her to the top of Beacon, where the Mobius facility is located. The administrator mocks her, revealing that STEM was created on the foundation of fear to control people, and that her mission is really just a trial for his new control method. After breaking free from his grasp, she confronts the administrator, who tries one last time to eliminate her, but ends up getting defeated. He ominously claims he will always be a part of her before she shoots him. When Kidman wakes up in the real world, she sees Leslie coming out of a STEM terminal, being taken away with Joseph, and notices that Ruvik's brain vessel is now empty, leaving her puzzled. Suddenly, a woman calls out to her from behind, and it turns out to be Myra, Sebastian's wife. Myra mentions that he will need a debriefing as soon as Kidman returns. With no one around to stop her, Kidman frees Sebastian and tells the Mobius crew to leave Sebastian, Connolly, and Jimenez behind because they're not going anywhere. The administrator's voice echoes, saying that no one is. Game development. Development for The Evil Within kicked off in late 2010, originally going by the name Project Zwei. Shinji Mikami, the mastermind behind Resident Evil, took the helm as director at his studio, Tango Gameworks. ZeniMax Media swooped in to acquire the studio shortly after development began. At first, Mikami wasn't keen on creating another survival horror title, but he soon realized there was a strong demand for it. He also felt that many modern horror games leaned too much into action, rather than focusing on survival. The game was officially announced in April 2013. Aiming to shake up the predictable survival horror cliches, the design intentionally makes players feel vulnerable by placing them in tight spaces, limiting ammo, and introducing nearly unstoppable foes that encourage fleeing instead of fighting. Art director Naoki Katakai explained that the enemy designs, like those wrapped in barbed wire or filled with glass, represent victims caught in a larger evil. The setting of the asylum drew inspiration from the Winchester Mystery House, a quirky mansion in California. The evil within runs on a modified version of ID Tech 5, enhanced by Tango Gameworks, to include dynamic lighting and tessellation. On April 15, 2013, Bethesda Softworks started dropping a series of mysterious teaser videos, officially unveiling the game on April 19, 2013, along with its title, platforms, and a live-action teaser. A second trailer followed on September 17, 2013, and an extended gameplay video was shown on September 27, 2013. Bethesda announced that the game had gone gold on September 25, 2014. The release. The Evil Within hit the shelves in October 2014, but in Japan, it was known as Psycho Break. To get a D-content rating and keep it available for players aged 17 and up, the Japanese version had to cut out some of the gory bits. However, players can get that content back through optional DLC. In Queensland, Australia, Warner Bros. Movie World set up a maze featuring real-life characters from the game during their annual Fright Nights event to help promote it. Before the game launched, Titan Comics put out a 4-part miniseries that took place before the main story. Also, Dark Horse Comics released a book called The Art of the Evil Within, which included concept art and behind-the-scenes info, right alongside the game on October 14, 2014. The game also has DLC missions where you can play as Julie Kidman and the enemy known as the Keeper. There's a story-driven campaign for Kidman split into 2 DLC packs, introducing new foes, locations, and diving into some mysteries left unsolved in the main game. The first pack, The Assignment, came out on all platforms in March 2015, and The Consequence followed in April 2015. The last DLC, The Executioner, lets you take control of the Keeper through a series of mission-based levels with some pretty twisted goals. This content was released on May 25, 2015, and you can play it from a first-person perspective. Game reception. Computer and Video Games, CVG, mentioned that this game was what Resident Evil 5 should have aimed for, though they pointed out some technical flaws. Videogamer.com appreciated the gunplay and horror elements, but found the story and pacing lacking, saying, "The Evil Within has enough charm to make it worth your time." Destructoid noted that while the game will satisfy those longing for a nostalgic gaming experience, newer players expecting a polished product might be disappointed. Philip Collar from Polygon shared that The Evil Within has fantastic moments where the combat and eerie environment shine, but these instances are short-lived, often losing their thrilling edge due to design choices that feel outdated. Ashley Reed from Games Radar rated the game 3.5 out of 5, highlighting its innovation and engaging story. However, she pointed out several flaws, mentioning, "The Evil Within trips up in too many areas to be considered Mikami's masterpiece. It forces players into frustrating combat situations more often than it should, and some promising plots and themes fizzle out disappointingly. Still, it would be unfair to overlook its strengths. With a captivating gore fest, a sense of achievement from its tough gameplay, and a narrative that dives into unsettling themes, The Evil Within has enough to offer that it's worth checking out." Lucy O'Brien at IGN gave the game a solid 8.7 out of 10, praising its gameplay and horror aspects. However, she criticized the dull main character, Sebastian, and the messy, convoluted storyline, stating that even though the story struggles under its own weight, it doesn't take away from the enjoyment of diving into survival horror. Christopher Livingston from PC Gamer had a mixed take on the game. He liked the survival elements, the tense and thrilling vibe, the satisfying stealth mechanics, and the action-packed sequences, along with the well-crafted environment. However, he wasn't a fan of the recycled bosses that often lacked scare factor, the subpar character models, late texture loading, clunky controls, annoying camera angles, limited video settings, and the poor choice of aspect ratio. He felt these technical flaws turned what could have been a fun challenge into a frustrating experience. Tim Turi from Game Informer highlighted the game's replay value, effective jump scares, impressive lighting, and the dark, unpredictable setting, along with the eerie sounds of enemies. On the downside, he pointed out the distracting texture pop-ins and a lackluster story. He wrapped it up by calling the game an unnerving experience that keeps your palms sweaty while offering a harrowingly rewarding gameplay trial. Sean McInnes from GameSpot praised the game's striking atmosphere, tense combat that promotes resourcefulness, and a satisfying skill progression system. However, he criticized the confusing story, forgettable characters, the autosave feature, and a few frustrating boss encounters. Due to the criticism regarding the aspect ratio, a patch was rolled out on June 23, 2015, allowing players to enjoy the game in full screen. Sales. In Japan, the game moved 176,691 physical copies on all platforms and around 4,138 digital copies. During its launch week, The Evil Within snagged the spot as the second bestseller in the UK across all formats. Over in the United States, it ranked as the third best-selling game for October 2014. It also made history by having the highest sales in its first month for a new survival horror franchise, a record that was eventually surpassed by Dying Light when it dropped in January 2015.